So welcome to the first Bible study. We're diving into this Bible study. And so the book I've chosen, I prayed about it, just tried to think about a good book to study would be, and we're studying Romans. And so it should be good. It's a great book. If you haven't already read it, definitely go read it. But yeah, it's phenomenal. But yeah, so today we're just going to be doing some background stuff on Romans before we actually dive into it next Tuesday. So the author, Paul. And so Paul, if you don't know who Paul is, if you're just really confused, Paul, he's the guy who used to persecute Christians. He met Jesus on the road to Damascus. He became a Christian, and he started doing ministry, started building churches, and he wrote a large portion of our New Testament, all these letters that he had written to these different churches. And so he was appointed by Jesus as the apostle to the Gentiles. And so I think that's something to just keep in the back of your mind as we study Romans here, because we're going to talk about that in a bit, why that's important. But yeah, so that's Paul. So Paul wrote Romans around 56 to 57 AD in Corinth. That's pretty late in his ministry, and Paul later arrived in Rome around 60 AD. And so Romans is the most comprehensive look at Paul's theology. It's the longest letter of Paul. That's why it's the first one right after Acts, is because Paul's epistles are organized in that the biggest one is first, and so on and so forth until you get to the smallest. So it's the biggest letter of Paul that we have, the most comprehensive look at his theology. But there's a common misconception here, because this is not a summary of Paul's theology. This is not everything. There are definitely some things that Paul does not talk about in Romans, some important things, some aspects of his theology that are not addressed in Romans. And Romans is still likely addressing issues in the Roman church. Paul did not write it to be like, boom, here is everything you need to know about my theology. That's not why he wrote Romans. Okay, so what is Paul addressing? One of the big things is Jewish and Gentile Christians, how they relate to each other post Christ. You see, in Rome, the Jews were exiled from Rome in around 49 AD, and then they returned in around 54 AD. And they found it very hard to reintegrate into the Roman church. They found it hard to come to agreement about certain issues, doctrines, and so there was a lot of problems between Jewish and Gentile Christians. And so Paul wanted unity between them, and he explains in Romans what the gospel is, and how it demonstrates the righteousness of God, and what's the importance of the law. Do Christians need to obey these food laws and Sabbath laws talked about in the Old Testament? And what does salvation of Gentiles mean? What does that mean for Israel? What does that mean for everyone? Yeah, so kind of the background for Romans here is this tension between Jews and Gentiles. And so the residents of Rome were mostly Gentiles, but a lot of Jewish people as well. And another important kind of background thing is that Paul wants to visit Rome on his way to Spain to continue his ministry. And so he's kind of explaining his message, the gospel, before he arrives in Rome, and he gets to spend time with the people in Rome. And so he's addressing these issues that he sees. And so because Paul knows some of the people in Rome, as we find out in the first chapter here. And so he knows some of the people, he has an idea of their situation. And yeah, so he's writing this letter to kind of address some things, let people know what the gospel is, and yeah, that's kind of the gist of it. So next week we're gonna dive into Romans 1. Yeah, I'm excited. So hit the little subscribe button for more videos every single week. Drop a comment if you're so inclined. Like the video. Have a great day, and I'll see you guys next week.